The first thing Wyatt Maddox heard was not the rain, not the traffic, and not even the low rumble of his Harley cooling beneath him. It was a child screaming words no child should ever have to scream. "Those men won't let my mommy in the hospital." The voice cut across the emergency entrance of Mercy General like a siren made of fear. Wyatt had just pulled into the visitor lot at 11:47 on a Friday night, one gloved hand still resting on the throttle, his black leather jacket darkened by rain. He had come for a simple reason: to drop off a paper bag of medication for an old army buddy recovering upstairs, then ride back to his garage before midnight. That was the plan. Wyatt liked plans. Plans kept a man out of trouble. Plans kept old mistakes from waking up and asking why he had not done better. But then the little girl came running barefoot across the wet pavement, her pink hoodie soaked through, one sleeve stretched over her hand like she had been clutching it too hard for too long. She could not have been more than 8. Her cheeks were red from crying. Her pale hair stuck to her forehead, and her eyes were fixed on him with the desperate belief that any adult who stopped might become the right one. Most people looked away. Wyatt saw it happen. A man under the awning lowered his phone. A woman near the sliding doors stepped back as if fear might be contagious. 2 security guards stood near the entrance, their bodies angled not toward the child, but toward the woman slumped on the bench beside the curb. Wyatt turned off the engine. The sudden silence made the rain sound heavier. The girl stopped 3 feet from him, chest heaving, small hands balled into fists. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "My mommy can't breathe right, and they said she can't go in." Wyatt looked past her. Under the harsh white lights of the emergency room entrance, a woman sat folded forward with one arm wrapped around her ribs and the other gripping the edge of the bench. Her coat was thin, the kind bought because it was affordable, not because it was warm. Water dripped from her sleeves onto the concrete. Every few seconds she tried to lift her head, and every time the effort seemed to cost her more than it should. One of the men at the door, a broad-shouldered security supervisor with a silver name badge that read Vance, held one palm out, as if keeping traffic from crossing a street. Beside him stood a tired-looking desk clerk in a hospital lanyard, shaking his head while holding a clipboard to his chest like it was a shield. Wyatt knew that look. He had seen it in bus stations, courtrooms, county offices, and cheap motels across 3 states. It was the look people gave when they had already decided someone did not belong. The little girl grabbed the edge of Wyatt's sleeve. "She asked nice," she whispered. "She said please. She said she just needed somebody to check her." Wyatt felt something old move behind his ribs, something he had spent years burying under engine noise and long roads. He was 6'3", 240 pounds, with scarred hands, a gray beard, and enough tattoos to make strangers choose another aisle at the grocery store. He knew exactly what he looked like walking toward a hospital entrance in a wet leather cut. He also knew what would happen if he let anger lead. The story would change before the truth even had a chance to breathe. So he lowered himself slowly to one knee, bringing his eyes level with the child's. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, keeping his voice soft enough that she would not flinch. "Maddie," she said. "Maddie Whitaker." "Okay, Maddie Whitaker," Wyatt said. "My name is Wyatt. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to scare anybody. I'm going to walk over there with you, and we're going to make sure your mom gets seen by the right person." Maddie swallowed hard and nodded, but her fingers stayed locked around his sleeve. Together they crossed the 30 feet of shining wet pavement toward the emergency doors. The woman on the bench heard their footsteps and tried to sit straighter. "Maddie," she breathed. "I'm here, Mommy," the girl said, rushing to her side. Wyatt stopped a respectful step away, close enough to help, far enough not to crowd her. "Ma'am," he said gently, "can you tell me your name?" The woman blinked up at him, frightened but fighting to stay calm for her. "Daughter. Claire," she whispered. "Claire Whitaker." Before Wyatt could ask another question, the security supervisor stepped forward. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." Wyatt turned his head slowly, rain running from the edge of his beard. His hands stayed open at his sides. His voice remained even. "A little girl just told me her mother can't breathe. That concerns every decent person standing here." The clerk tightened his grip on the clipboard. "We have procedures." Wyatt looked at Claire, then at Maddie, then at the bright automatic doors that kept sliding open and closed for everyone except the woman who needed them most. "Procedures can wait," he said quietly. "Breathing can't." Claire Whitaker tried to answer the question written on every face around her, but her breath came in small, careful pieces, as if the air had turned too heavy to lift. She was 34 years old, though under the emergency entrance lights she looked older, not because of age, but because exhaustion had a way of stealing years from a person before anyone noticed. Her left hand pressed against her chest. Her right hand kept reaching for Maddie, touching her shoulder, her hair, her sleeve, checking that her daughter was still there. Wyatt had seen that kind of fear before. Not the fear of pain, the fear of leaving a child alone in a world that had already proven it could be unkind. How long has she been like this? Wyatt asked Maddie, keeping his eyes on Claire's face, watching the color around her mouth, the shallow rise and fall beneath her wet coat. Since after dinner, Maddie said. She said it was just a cold. Then she started coughing really bad in the car. We walked from the bus stop because the driver said this was the closest place. Wyatt glanced toward the street beyond the parking lot. The nearest bus stop was almost half a mile away, downhill and across two busy intersections. In this rain, with a sick woman and a frightened child, that walk might as well have been 5 miles. Claire swallowed and forced out a whisper. I lost my wallet 2 days ago. I told them. I gave them my name. I said they could look me up. Martin Keller, the desk clerk, shifted his weight, uncomfortable now that there were more witnesses listening. No one refused treatment, he said quickly. We simply asked her to complete intake properly. She became emotional. Maddie's head snapped up. She was crying because she could not breathe. The words were small, but they landed hard. Nurse Paula Briggs stood just inside the sliding doors, one hand pressed against the frame. She looked like she wanted to step out and had been told not to. Her blue scrubs were wrinkled from a long shift, her hair pinned back with a pencil, her eyes moving between Claire and the men at the entrance. Wyatt noticed her before anyone else did. He saw the hesitation. He also saw the concern. Nurse, he called, not loudly, but clearly enough to cut through the rain. Could you please come check her breathing? Vance turned first. Sir, you need to back up. Wyatt did not move closer. He did not raise his voice. He only turned his open palms slightly outward, letting everyone see there was no thread in his hands. I am backed up, he said. I am asking for medical staff to look at a woman sitting outside an emergency room. The sliding doors opened with a soft mechanical sigh, spilling warm air onto the wet concrete. For a second, no one moved. Then Paula stepped out. Vance frowned. Paula, we are handling it. She looked at Claire, and the frown on her own face deepened into something like worry. How long has she been outside? Martin glanced down at the clipboard. That is not the point. It is exactly the point, Wyatt said. His voice stayed quiet, but something in it made people listen. Paula crouched in front of Claire, her professional calm settling over her like a coat. Claire, my name is Paula. I am going to ask you a few questions. Can you tell me where the pain is? Claire tapped the center of her chest with 2 trembling fingers. Here, and my back. I thought it was the flu. Any fever? Since yesterday. Any dizziness? Claire nodded, then closed her eyes as if even that small movement cost too much. Maddie began to cry again, but this time she tried to do it silently, turning her face into Wyatt's sleeve. He looked down at her and felt that old pain stir. Again, sharp and familiar, but he pushed it aside. This moment did not belong to his past. It belonged to the child holding on to him and the mother fighting to stay upright on a hospital bench. Paula stood quickly. She needs triage now. Martin stepped in front of the door, not fully blocking it, but enough to make the meaning clear. We still do not have identification or insurance information. The rain seemed to pause around the sentence. Even Vance looked toward the parking lot, as though he wished those words had not been said out loud. Wyatt looked at the clerk, then at the automatic doors glowing behind him, then at the people pretending not to stare. A young man near the vending machines had his phone raised, recording. An older couple sat frozen in their car with the windows fogged. Somewhere inside the hospital, a monitor beeped steadily, a calm sound in a moment that had lost all calm. Wyatt took one slow breath. Sir, he said. That woman walked through the rain with her child because she believed this was the safest place in town. Do not make her daughter remember it as the place where paperwork stood in front of mercy. Martin opened his mouth, but no answer came. Claire suddenly bent forward, coughing into her sleeve, and Maddie screamed, Mommy! Paula reached for Claire's shoulder. Wyatt stepped aside to give her room, his heart hammering beneath the leather and rain. The doors opened again, And this time the warm light from inside fell across Claire's face like a promise that had almost arrived too late. For one dangerous second, the entire entrance seemed to hold its breath with Claire. Paula moved first, placing a steady hand between Claire's shoulder blades while speaking in the calm, practiced voice of someone who had spent years guiding frightened people through the worst minutes of their lives. "Claire, look at me if you can. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Nice and slow." Claire tried. Her breath caught halfway, thin and uneven, and Maddie made a sound so small it barely rose above the rain. Wyatt wanted to step in, wanted to lift Claire himself and carry her through the doors, but he knew what that would become in the eyes of people already looking for a reason to blame him. A large biker grabbing a sick woman outside a hospital. That was all it would take. One bad angle. One frightened witness. One sentence taken out of context. He forced his boots to stay planted on the wet concrete. Real help was not always the loudest thing a man could do. Sometimes it was knowing when to make room. "Paula," he said quietly, "tell me where you want us." She looked up, surprised by the question. Most people in emergencies either froze or crowded in too close. Wyatt had done neither. "Keep the child beside you, but not in front of the doors," she said, "and ask someone inside to get a wheelchair." Wyatt turned toward the small crowd under the awning. Several adults looked away. One young man still held his phone chest high, filming with wide eyes. Wyatt pointed to him, not sharply, just clearly. "You in the gray sweatshirt. Please go to the desk and ask for a wheelchair right now." The young man blinked, then lowered the phone and hurried inside. Vance stepped closer, his jaw tight. "You do not give orders here." Wyatt looked at him, then looked down at Maddie, who was shaking so hard her teeth had begun to chatter. "Then give the right ones," Wyatt said. "Because she is watching every adult here." That sentence changed the air more than anger could have. Vance glanced at Maddie and, for the first time, seemed to truly see her. Not as noise, not as a problem, as a child standing barefoot in a storm while her mother struggled to breathe. Martin Keller shifted behind him, face pale beneath the fluorescent light. "This is being misrepresented," he said. "There are policies. Policies are supposed to help people reach care." Paula said, her voice firmer now. "Not keep them outside in the rain." The sliding doors opened, and the young man returned pushing a wheelchair too fast, its wheels squeaking across the entrance mat. Wyatt stepped forward only far enough to stop it from rolling past, then angled it near Claire without touching her. Paula and another nurse who had just arrived helped Claire stand. It was only a few inches, only a careful transfer from bench to chair, but to Maddie it looked like the whole world balancing on a thread. She reached for her mother, then stopped herself, afraid of getting in the way. Wyatt saw the choice tear through her little face. "You can talk to her," he said softly. "She can hear you." Maddie leaned close, hands pressed against her own chest, as if holding herself together. "Mommy, I am right here. I did what you said. I found a grown-up." Claire's eyes opened halfway. Through the pain and fear, something like relief passed over her face. "Good girl," she whispered. "My brave girl." The words nearly broke Wyatt. Not because they were dramatic, but because they were ordinary. A mother praising her child. A child trying to be brave. The kind of moment that should have happened in a warm kitchen, beside a bowl of soup and a stack of homework, not under hospital lights with rain running beneath their shoes. As Paula began pushing the wheelchair toward the doors, Martin moved beside her with the clipboard still in hand. "We will need information before she goes back." Paula did not stop. "You can collect what you need after she is breathing comfortably." Martin looked to Vance for support, but Vance had gone quiet. The security supervisor's eyes were on the concrete, where Maddie's small wet footprints marked the path from the curb to Wyatt's motorcycle and back again. The doors opened wide. Warm air rushed out. Claire crossed the threshold at last. Maddie started to follow, but Martin put out a hand, not touching her, only blocking her path. "Family may need to wait until intake is complete." Wyatt felt heat rise in his chest, old and dangerous, but he swallowed it down before it reached his voice. He crouched beside Maddie instead. "Look at me," he said. Her frightened eyes met his. "You did not cause trouble. You got help. That is what love does when it refuses to be quiet." Behind them, deeper inside the emergency room, someone called for Dr. Hannah Mercer. And when Wyatt heard the urgency in that voice, he understood that this night had only just begun. The name Dr. Hannah Mercer carried through the emergency room with the kind of weight that made people straighten without being asked. She appeared from behind the nurse's station in a white coat over navy scrubs, her dark blonde hair pulled back, her face calm but focused in a way that left no room for excuses. She was not tall, not loud, and not the sort of person who needed to be. Authority moved with her because she had earned it one midnight shift at a time. Paula pushed Claire's wheelchair toward the triage bay, speaking quickly. 34-year-old female, chest discomfort, shortness of breath, fever since yesterday, dizziness, exposure to rain, delayed at entrance. That last phrase landed like a stone dropped into still water. Dr. Mercer looked from Paula to Claire, then to Maddie, standing near Wyatt with both arms wrapped around herself. How long was she outside? She asked. Martin Keller answered before Paula could. There was confusion regarding intake. Dr. Mercer did not look at him. That was not my question. The quiet in the hallway deepened. Wyatt saw Martin's throat move as he swallowed. Vance stood near the sliding doors, suddenly interested in the floor tiles. Paula's voice was low but clear. Approximately 19 minutes from first approach to wheelchair transfer, based on what the child and the lobby camera suggest. Dr. Mercer's expression changed by only a fraction, but Wyatt recognized it. He had seen that look on field medics when a preventable delay turned a hard night harder. Not panic, not drama. The cold focus of someone who understood that minutes mattered. Bay 3, she said. Now. Claire was rolled behind a curtain, and Maddie took one step after her before stopping at the invisible line where grown-up rules began. Can I go with her? She asked. Dr. Mercer turned, and the sharpness in her face softened at once. In just a minute, sweetheart. We need to get your mom settled first. Nurse Paula will stay where you can see her. Maddie nodded, but her chin trembled. Wyatt stayed beside her, careful not to pretend he had a right to be family. He was a stranger in wet boots and a leather jacket, standing in a hospital hallway that smelled of disinfectant, coffee, and rainwater. But when Maddie reached for his sleeve again, he let her hold on. The beeping from inside Bay 3 started steady, then quickened as more staff moved around Claire. Voices overlapped, professional and clipped, asking about oxygen, temperature, blood pressure, allergies, medical history. Wyatt had spent enough time around emergency medicine during his Army years to understand the shape of concern without needing every word. Claire was not being treated like an inconvenience anymore. She was being treated like a person whose life had weight. That should have comforted him. Instead, it opened a door in his memory he had kept locked for years. Another hospital. Another storm. Rebecca's hand on the dashboard of his old pickup, her face turned toward the window because she did not want him to see how scared she was. She had said it was probably nothing. He had wanted to believe her because believing her meant he did not have to choose between her and the club waiting for him across town. He had made the wrong choice quietly, the way cowards sometimes do, not with cruelty, but with delay. He had told himself he had time. Time had proved him wrong. Mr. Wyatt? Maddie's voice pulled him back so sharply he almost forgot where he was. She was looking up at him, rain still shining in her pale hair, her eyes too old for 8 years. Is my mommy going to die because I could not make them listen? The question entered him like winter air. Wyatt crouched slowly, ignoring the ache in his knees, bringing himself down to her level again. For a moment, he saw Rebecca in the glass of the vending machine behind Maddie, not as a ghost, but as a memory of everything he had failed to protect by staying silent too long. He wanted to promise the child everything would be fine. He wanted to hand her a perfect answer wrapped in certainty. But children knew when adults lied to make themselves feel better. So he gave her the truth gently. No, Maddie, he said. Whatever happens in that room, this is not your fault. You did the bravest thing a child can do. You kept asking for help when the adults around you were not listening. Her lower lip shook. But Mommy always says not to bother people. Wyatt glanced toward Bay 3, where Dr. Mercer's voice cut through the curtain with steady command. Then he looked back at Maddie. There is a difference between bothering people and needing people, he said. When someone you love is in trouble, asking for help is not being a burden. It is being brave enough to believe somebody should care. Maddie stared at him as if those words were something she had never been allowed to own. Behind them, Martin Keller spoke in a tense whisper to Vance near the entrance, saying something about reports and misunderstandings. Wyatt heard it, but did not turn. For once in his life, the noise of men protecting themselves mattered less than the quiet of a child learning She had done nothing wrong. Then the curtain to Bay 3 pulled open, and Dr. Mercer stepped out with her eyes fixed not on the clerk, not on security, but on Wyatt and the little girl beside him. Her face told him the night had shifted again, and whatever came next would ask even more of them. Dr. Mercer stepped closer, lowering her voice so Maddie would not hear more fear than she needed to. "Your mother is awake, and she is answering questions," she said. "That is good. We are giving her oxygen and checking for infection, dehydration, and heart strain. I do not want you imagining the worst, but I also do not want anyone pretending this was nothing." Maddie nodded too quickly, the way children do when they are trying to become adults in a hurry. Wyatt saw her eyes flick past the doctor toward the curtain. Every part of her wanted to run to Claire, but every rule in the bright hallway told her to wait. Dr. Mercer noticed too. She crouched with the same careful grace Wyatt had used outside. "Maddie, I need 5 more minutes with your mom. Nurse Paula is going to bring you a warm blanket and some dry socks. After that, you can sit where she can see you. Can you do that for me?" Maddie whispered, "Yes, ma'am." The doctor gave a small smile, then stood and turned toward Martin Keller and Vance. The warmth left her face. "I need the lobby camera preserved, the entrance log printed, and a written account from every staff member who interacted with Miss Whitaker before she was brought inside." Martin's face tightened. "Dr. Mercer, with respect, this is becoming larger than it needs to be. A mother with breathing difficulty sat outside my emergency department in the rain," Dr. Mercer said. "It is exactly as large as it needs to be." Wyatt stayed silent, but the words settled over him like something clean. Not loud, not cruel, just true. Vance cleared his throat. There was concern about safety. Dr. Mercer looked at Wyatt, then at Maddie, then back at Vance. "The only safety concern I see right now is that a child had to find a stranger in the parking lot before her mother reached Treoff." No one answered. For once, the hallway did not reward excuses. Paula returned with a gray hospital blanket and a pair of socks with blue grips on the bottom. Maddie accepted them with both hands like they were something precious. Wyatt turned slightly away while Paula helped her sit on a vinyl chair near the wall, then draped the blanket around her shoulders. The child's bare feet looked impossibly small against the polished floor. "Thank you," Maddie said. "You do not have to thank me for socks, honey," Paula replied. "You deserve to be warm." Wyatt felt the sentence in his chest. You deserve to be warm. It was so simple, and somehow so rare. In his world, people earned shelter, earned kindness, earned forgiveness, or went without. But Maddie had not earned anything tonight. She simply needed it. That should have been enough from the beginning. A soft chime came from the nurse's station. A monitor inside Bay 3 began to beat out a steadier rhythm. Dr. Mercer disappeared behind the curtain again, and Paula followed. Wyatt remained beside the chair, not sitting until Maddie looked up and asked, "Are you leaving?" The question was quiet, but it carried the weight of every adult who had ever stepped away when things became uncomfortable. Wyatt looked toward the exit. His wet Harley waited under the awning. His old army friend upstairs still had not received his medication. His garage was dark across town, the lift half raised, tomorrow's work already waiting. There were a dozen reasons to go. There was one reason to stay. "Not yet," he said. Maddie pulled the blanket tighter. "People get mad when we need help." Wyatt lowered himself into the chair beside her, leaving enough space so she would not feel trapped. "Some people do," he said, "usually because they have forgotten what needing help feels like." She studied his hands, the scars across his knuckles, the grease beneath one fingernail he had missed before riding over. "Do you ever need help?" Wyatt almost smiled, but it did not quite make it. "More than I admit." For a while, they listened to the rain tapping against the glass doors and the soft movement of nurses working beyond the curtain. Then Maddie said, "Mommy says we should not judge people by how they look." Wyatt looked down at his black leather, his heavy boots, the faded patches and old road dust clinging to him like a second skin. "Your mom sounds wise." Maddie nodded. "She said scary-looking people can still be kind, and nice-looking people can still be mean." Before Wyatt could answer, Martin walked past them carrying forms, his face set in a mask of injured pride. He did not look at Maddie. He did not look at Wyatt. But when he reached the desk, the young man in the gray sweatshirt who had brought the wheelchair spoke up from the waiting area. "I recorded what happened outside," he said. "If the doctor needs it, I will share it." Martin froze. Vance looked toward the lobby camera. Wyatt did not move, But he felt the night turn again. The truth, quiet and patient, had started gathering witnesses. The young man in the gray sweatshirt looked startled by his own courage, as if the words had stepped out of him before fear could pull them back. He was maybe 22, with rain still clinging to his hair and a hospital visitor badge stuck crooked on his chest. His phone was in his hand, screen glowing, thumb hovering over the video. "I did not record to cause trouble," he said, voice shaking slightly. "I just thought someone should know what really happened." The waiting area went still. A television mounted in the corner played a weather report no one was watching. Rain streaked the dark windows. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled over tile. Ordinary hospital sounds moving through an extraordinary silence. Martin Keller stared at the phone as if it were a locked door he had lost the key to. "Recording in a medical facility can violate privacy rules," he said, trying to recover the ground beneath him. Dr. Mercer had just stepped out from Bay 3 again, removing a pair of gloves. "Then we will handle it properly," she said. "He can provide it to hospital administration or to the responding officer if needed. But do not confuse privacy with invisibility, Mr. Keller. Those are not the same thing." Wyatt watched the clerk's shoulders sink by half an inch. Not enough to look defeated. Enough to show that the room had shifted away from him. Vance crossed his arms, but the strength had gone out of the gesture. The lobby camera above the sliding doors blinked with its small red light, steady and patient. It had seen Maddie running. It had seen Claire outside. It had seen Wyatt stop and kneel instead of shout. Truth did not always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it came from a camera in the corner, a witness in a gray sweatshirt, and a doctor who refused to let procedure become a wall. Paula guided Maddie closer to Bay 3, stopping where the curtain left a narrow opening. Claire lay propped against white pillows, an oxygen tube in place. Her damp hair brushed away from her face. She looked fragile, but not forgotten. Machines hummed around her in soft, measured rhythms. Maddie took one step forward, then looked back at Wyatt, asking permission without words. He nodded. "Go on," he said. "She needs to see you." Maddie slipped inside and reached for her mother's hand. Claire's fingers curled weakly around hers. The sight hit Wyatt harder than he expected, not because it was dramatic, but because it was tender in the middle of everything cold. A child's hand inside a mother's hand. A reminder that every policy, every desk, every locked door, and every badge existed for moments exactly like this, or they had no meaning at all. Dr. Mercer walked to Wyatt's side. "You military?" she asked quietly. Wyatt kept his eyes on the curtain. "Army. A long time ago. Medic. Not officially by the end. But I learned enough to know when breathing is not something to debate." Dr. Mercer gave a small nod. "You handled yourself well out there." Wyatt almost laughed. Praise sat strangely on him, like a borrowed coat. "I did not do much. You did enough without making yourself the center of it. That matters." Her words stayed with him as Officer Daniel Reeves entered through the sliding doors, rainwater shining on the shoulders of his uniform jacket. He was young for the job, maybe early 30s, with careful eyes and the tired expression of a man called to too many scenes where people had stopped listening before he arrived. Vance straightened immediately, relieved to see a badge he understood. "Officer, we have an issue with an outside individual interfering with emergency department operations." Wyatt did not move. He had expected this. Men like Vance reached for authority when truth became uncomfortable. Officer Reeves looked at Wyatt's leather jacket, the boots, the wet beard, the motorcycle helmet resting on the chair beside him. For a moment, Wyatt saw the familiar calculation pass across the officer's face. Biker. Trouble. Possible threat. Then Maddie's voice came from behind the curtain. "He helped my mommy." It was soft, but everyone heard it. Reeves turned toward her. Maddie stood half-hidden beside Claire's bed, blanket around her shoulders, blue hospital socks on her feet. "He did not yell," she said. "He told them breathing could not wait." The officer's face changed. Not completely, just enough. He looked at Dr. Mercer. She met his gaze without blinking. "I will need you to document the delay at the entrance," she said. "The lobby camera should be preserved. A visitor also has video of the initial interaction. The patient is now receiving care." Reeves nodded slowly, then turned back to Wyatt. "Mr. Maddox, is it?" Wyatt lifted his chin. "Yes, sir. I am going to ask you some questions in a few minutes. I will answer them." Vance opened his mouth again, but Reeves raised one hand, not sharply, just firmly. "First I am going to speak with the nurse, the doctor, the child, and the witness." Martin looked down at his clipboard, but it no longer looked like a shield. It looked like paper. And for the first time that night, Wyatt saw the real reversal settle over the room. The man everyone expected to be dangerous had become the calmest witness. The child everyone had ignored had become the clearest voice. And the woman who had been treated like a problem was finally, unmistakably, a patient. Officer Reeves took statements in the quiet way of a man who understood that frightened people told the truth better when they were not being crowded. He spoke first with Dr. Mercer near the nurse's station, then with Paula outside Bay 3, then with the young man in the gray sweatshirt, whose name was Noah Bennett and whose hands still trembled when he unlocked his phone. Wyatt stayed in the chair by the wall, helmet at his feet, rain drying slowly on his jacket. He had answered every question asked of him and offered nothing extra. Men with pasts like his learned not to volunteer their whole lives just because someone with a badge looked curious. Still, Reeves had surprised him. The officer listened. Really listened. Not to the leather. Not to the reputation strangers invented in their heads. To the order of events, to the voices, to the child, to the camera, to the simple fact that Claire Whitaker had needed care before she needed a form. Inside Bay 3, Maddie sat beside her mother's bed with her blue hospital socks tucked under the chair, one small hand wrapped around Claire's fingers. Claire looked better than she had outside, though her face still carried the washed-out gray of someone whose body had been pushed too far for too long. The oxygen helped. The warm blankets helped. Being believed helped most of all. Dr. Mercer had told them they were still waiting on test results, but the first treatments had already begun. Infection was possible. Dehydration was certain. Stress had taken what little strength Claire had left and wrung it dry. Maddie did not understand all of that, but she understood her mother was warmer now. She understood people were moving with purpose. She understood the door had finally opened. After a while, Claire turned her head toward Wyatt. "Mr. Maddox," she said, her voice weak but clear enough to carry beyond the curtain. Wyatt stood, then hesitated. At the entrance to the bay. "I am here, ma'am." Claire's eyes filled before she could stop them. "Thank you for hearing her. Not thank you for saving me. Not thank you for fighting. Thank you for hearing her." The words went straight to the part of him he trusted least. Wyatt stepped closer, stopping near the foot of the bed. "She made herself heard," he said. "I just paid attention." Maddie looked down at the blanket in her lap. "I was scared I was being bad." Claire's face changed with a pain no medicine could touch. "Oh, baby. Because Mr. Keller said we had to wait, and Mr. Vance looked mad, and I thought maybe if I kept asking, people would get madder." Her voice became smaller with every word. "But if I stopped asking, Mommy, I thought you might not wake up." The room went silent except for the steady monitor and the rain against the windows. Wyatt felt Dr. Mercer pause behind him. Paula looked away for a second, blinking fast. Even Officer Reeves, standing near the nurse's station with his notebook open, lowered his pen. Claire tried to lift her hand, but the tubing tugged gently, so Maddie leaned closer instead. "Listen to me," Claire whispered. "You were not bad. You were brave." Maddie shook her head, not believing it yet. Wyatt knew that look. Shame took root easily in children when adults handed it to them by mistake. He pulled the chair a little closer, but did not sit until Claire gave him a small nod. Then he lowered himself beside Maddie, his large frame folding awkwardly into the small hospital space. "Can I tell you something I wish someone had told me when I was younger?" he asked. Maddie looked at him. "What?" Wyatt rested his scarred hands on his knees, palms open. "There are times when being quiet is kind. In a library. In a church. When someone is sleeping. But when somebody you love is in danger, silence is not kindness anymore. Asking for help is not trouble. Asking again when no one listens is courage." Maddie's eyes searched his face, trying to decide whether a grown man who looked like thunder could be trusted with something as fragile as truth. "Even if people get angry?" she asked. Wyatt nodded slowly. "Especially then. Some people get angry because your need interrupts their comfort. But needing help does not make you wrong." Claire closed her eyes, and one tear slipped down the side of her face into her hair. "I taught her to be polite," she said softly. "I did not mean to teach her to disappear." Dr. Mercer stepped into the room then, her voice gentle but firm. "Politeness should never require a child to ignore an emergency." The sentence settled over all of them. It was not an accusation. It was a lesson, The kind that could change a family if it was remembered at the right time. Maddie leaned against the bed, and Claire managed to brush her fingers over her daughter's cheek. Wyatt looked at them and thought of Rebecca, of every late apology that had arrived after it could no longer help. Tonight, at least, the apology had come early enough to become action. Outside the bay, Officer Reeves closed his notebook and turned toward Martin Keller and Vance. His voice was calm, but there was no softness in it now. "I am going to need both of you to come with me to the front desk and walk me through exactly why a mother with breathing difficulty remained outside." Martin looked at the floor. Vance glanced once at Wyatt, then away. Wyatt did not feel victory. Victory was too small a word for a night like this. What he felt was the weight of a door that had almost stayed closed, and the grace of a child who had refused to let it. By the time Officer Reeves walked Martin Keller and Russell Vance back toward the front desk, the waiting room had changed in a way no one could measure on a chart. People were still tired. The vending machine still hummed. The rain still painted silver lines down the glass. But the silence was different now. It was no longer the silence of people pretending not to see. It was the silence of people realizing they had seen too much to pretend anymore. Noah Bennett sat near the wall with his phone in both hands, ready to share the video if asked. The older couple from the fogged-up car had come inside and quietly told Paula they had watched Claire sitting outside before Wyatt arrived. A woman holding a sleeping toddler said she remembered Maddie asking at the desk more than once. One by one, small pieces of truth gathered until the story no longer belonged to the loudest person in the room. It belonged to everyone who had witnessed it. Dr. Mercer returned to Bay 3 with preliminary results and a steadier expression. Claire had a serious infection that had likely started days earlier and had worsened because she kept working through fever and pain. She was dehydrated, exhausted, and her breathing had become strained enough that waiting longer would have made the night far more dangerous. She needed medicine, fluids, monitoring, and rest. What she did not need, the doctor said plainly, was shame. Claire listened with her eyes lowered, as if every explanation was also an apology she was supposed to make. "I thought I could get through one more shift," she whispered. "I clean offices at night. If I miss too many hours, I fall behind. If I fall behind, rent comes first, then food, then everything else waits." Maddie leaned against her mother's side carefully, afraid to disturb the tubes and wires. "You gave me your soup yesterday," she said. Claire closed her eyes. That was the secret she had hoped her daughter had not noticed. Wyatt stood near the curtain, feeling the words settle into the room heavier than rain. Poverty was rarely one big dramatic fall. More often, it was 1,000 quiet trades no one applauded. A mother skipping dinner so a child could eat. A bill delayed so the heat stayed on. A fever ignored because a missing paycheck could shake an entire life loose. Dr. Mercer pulled a chair closer to Claire's bed. "Miss Whitaker, needing help does not make you irresponsible. It makes you human. Our job is to treat the human being in front of us first. The paperwork comes after." Claire looked up then, and for the first time that night, some of the fear left her face. Outside the bay, Officer Reeves finished reviewing the entrance camera with Hospital Security Administration on the phone. He did not raise his voice, but his words were clear enough to reach the hallway. The footage shows the patient seated outside before medical assessment. It also shows the child requesting help. "I will include that in the report." Martin stood beside the desk, holding the clipboard lower now, no longer like a shield, but like something he did not know where to put. Vance kept his hands folded in front of him, his face stiff with the discomfort of a man being asked to explain not just what he did, but why he thought it was acceptable. Reeves turned to them. "I am not here to decide hospital discipline, but I am here to document that a person in medical distress was delayed at the entrance, and that witnesses described the child seeking help before staff intervened." Vance muttered, "We were trying to keep order." Wyatt heard it from the hallway and finally turned. He did not step closer. He did not lift his voice. "Order without compassion is just a locked door," he said. The words were simple, but they landed everywhere. Martin looked at Maddie through the gap in the curtain. She was not glaring at him. She was not trying to punish him. She was just a child in borrowed socks watching adults decide what kind of world she lived in. That seemed to make him look away faster than anger would have. A few minutes later, Paula brought Maddie a paper cup of apple juice and a pack of crackers. Maddie thanked her twice. Claire apologized for the trouble. Paula touched the side rail of the bed and shook her head. "You are not trouble," she said. You are a patient, and she is your daughter. That is enough. Wyatt looked down at his wet boots, suddenly aware of how close he had come to walking past this whole night. One turn of the key, one glance away, one more man deciding it was not his business. Instead, Maddie had found him in the rain, and the door had opened. Not because he was powerful, not because he looked dangerous, but because, for once, he had stayed long enough to listen. Claire stayed at Mercy General for 3 days. By Saturday morning, the rain had stopped, the sky over Ashford had cleared to a pale blue, and Maddie had fallen asleep in a chair beside her mother with Wyatt's folded leather jacket under her head like a pillow. Wyatt never told her he had once believed that jacket made him look untouchable. Watching a child sleep on it changed the meaning of the thing. It was no longer armor. It was shelter. Dr. Mercer checked on Claire before sunrise and told her the infection was responding, her breathing had improved, and she would need rest, follow-up care, and people willing to help before she reached the edge again. Claire cried when she heard the word help, not because she disliked it, but because life had trained her to hear it as something expensive. Paula sat with her and explained the hospital social worker could help arrange medication assistance, transportation vouchers, and a clinic appointment that would not depend on whether Claire had every document in her purse. Officer Reeves filed his report before his shift ended. The hospital opened an internal review. Martin Keller was reassigned pending training and investigation, and Russell Vance was placed on administrative leave while security leadership reviewed the footage and witness statements. None of it made the night disappear, but it mattered that the truth did not vanish with the rain. When Wyatt finally rode home, he took the long road past the cemetery where Rebecca was buried. He did not stop at first. He circled the block once, then twice, then parked under a maple tree with wet leaves shining in the morning sun. For years, he had brought guilt to that place like an offering, as if carrying it long enough might become the same thing as changing. That morning, he stood beside the stone and spoke only 6 words. I stopped this time. I listened. The wind moved through the branches, and for the first time in a long time, silence did not feel like punishment. 3 weeks later, Wyatt returned to Mercy General on a Tuesday afternoon with 6 riders from his club, not roaring in to frighten anyone, but arriving quietly with boxes in the back of a pickup truck. Inside were children's sweatshirts, dry socks, sealed snack packs, prepaid bus cards, phone chargers, notebooks, and grocery gift cards donated by the garage, the diner, the church on Maple Street, and a dozen people who had heard what happened and wanted to be better than bystanders. Dr. Mercer met them at the entrance, and Paula laughed when she saw the label Wyatt had. Taped to the first box, the Open Door Fund. Wyatt shrugged like it was no big thing, but Maddie saw the way his eyes softened when Claire walked in beside her, stronger now, wearing a red scarf and holding a thank you card made from construction paper. On the front, Maddie had drawn a hospital door wide open. Under the awning stood a tall man in a black jacket, holding the rain back with one hand while a mother and child stepped into the light. Wyatt stared at it longer than he meant to. You made me look too tall, he said, his voice rough. Maddie smiled. That is how you look to me. Claire reached for his hand and squeezed it once. You did not just help us get inside, she said. You reminded my daughter that the world still has people who will listen. Wyatt looked through the glass doors at the waiting room, where strangers sat with tired faces and private worries, each one carrying a story nobody could see from the outside. He thought of all the ways people judge too quickly. A mother without a wallet, a child who will not stop asking, a biker in wet leather, a clerk behind a desk, a guard at a door. Every person was more than the first thing others noticed. That was the lesson Mercy General learned the hard way, and the lesson Wyatt carried back onto the road. Strength was not the power to make people afraid. It was the discipline to stay gentle when anger would be easier. Respect was not something reserved for the polished, the insured, or the easy to understand. It belonged to the frightened, the tired, the poor, the grieving, and the small voices asking for help in the rain. As Wyatt walked back to his Harley that afternoon, Maddie ran after him in her blue sneakers and held out his jacket, freshly cleaned and carefully folded. You forgot this, she said. Wyatt took it, then draped it over her shoulders for one last second, making her laugh beneath its weight. No, he said. I remembered exactly where I left it. Then he rode away under a clear Pennsylvania sky, not as a man who had erased his past, but as one who had finally learned what to do when the next door needed opening.